Hello and good afternoon. My name is Shomik Ghosh and I'm Assistant Editor at ETCSO. And I'll be moderating today's webinar on evolving DNS as a part of your security strategy. Now, DNS, as you know, domain name system attack has been around for quite some time. It's basically an attack that targets the availability or the stability of a network's DNS service. In fact, an IDC survey shows that about 87% of organizations have experienced DNS attacks at some point in time. Now, like we discussed, DNS attacks have been around for some time, but many types of malware today are using DNS as a part of their overall function to not only communicate with the CNC or the command and control server, but to also update and evolve itself. A perfect example is the recent WannaCry ransomware. Now, today's webinar is a bit different. It packs a punch. We will talk about not only the challenges of securing DNS infrastructure and the tools available to help, but we'll also discuss how attackers exploit DNS. And most importantly, we'll learn how cybersecurity professionals can proactively use DNS to turn the tables and mitigate those threats. Now, to take this further, I'm happy to welcome Pratik Prasad, the Senior Solutions Architect, SARC at Infoblox. Pratik, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure hosting you.
Hi, Shomik. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's good to be back on the show.
Absolutely. Great having you too. And I would also like to welcome Nitin Dubey. He is the Senior Solutions Architect, SARC at Infoblox. Nitin, hi, good afternoon. Welcome again.
Afternoon, Shomik, and it's always pleasure to connect with you on these sessions.
Absolutely. Now, like we discussed earlier, we've had a lot of, sessions and webinars on DNS, on DDoS attacks. But then we haven't really discussed, how do we retaliate? What can the enterprise do to actually use that DNS and fight back against the bad guys? And I'm excited that we're going to be exploring that in today's webinar. So without further ado, let me hand it over to you again. Over to you.
It's always a very exciting topic, to talk about how our products fit into the overall, cybersecurity ecosystem. Because Infoblox is known, quite predominantly as a DNS, DHCP, and IP address management product, right? But very few think about Infoblox in the cybersecurity space, and that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. How can you start seeing more value out of your cybersecurity ecosystem, and how do you evolve DNS as a part of your security strategy? And how can Infoblox help? And those are all the different touch points that we will be covering on today. As a part of the agenda, what we will do is just walk through what the threat landscape is today, what are all of the industry leaders out there are doing with DNS, with cybersecurity, how are they putting together the integration, what are some of the factors to consider when we talk about DNS detection and response. And of course, the most important thing that I think everybody in the audience today is waiting for, the integration. What can you do with Infoblox, with all of the other tools as a part of your security ecosystem that you might already have today, right? So we're gonna, close on a high note with those integration use cases, right? So moving forward, let's take a look at what's happening. I didn't want to have all of the video coming in on the wonderful presentation we've got going on over here, right? So as a part of, what's happening today, right? Ever since COVID struck, we've all been working from home, working from anywhere, which means as an industry, as a workforce, as just an IT technology cadre, we're all kind of moving onto a work from anywhere, having everything over the internet model, right? What that also means is, along with those benefits, there are also a lot of threats that are evolving, right? Before, we were very aware of something called phishing attacks, where we receive emails with illegitimate links, with malicious domains in there. And those were an attack vector using which malicious actors would get a hold within our organization, right? They would find a backdoor into our organization. Something that's evolved from a phishing attack is a smishing attack, right? Messaging. I mean, we've heard about this a lot of late, right? We're getting, messages where we have links where they're soliciting information. There's a lot of these kind of attacks going on every day, right? The speed of innovation and change with this is also outpacing the security protocols we have in place, right? It's the typical, police and a thief scenario, right? One evolves and the other one, evolves along with them to beat those protocols in place, right? So the tactics and the techniques like all the smishing, they have they include, they use a lot of sophisticated domains. The techniques that they employ make it extremely hard to discern what is legitimate and what is illegitimate, right? Especially for humans to just take a look at them once and figure out whether they're good or they're bad, right? So this is exactly where specialized tools that are capable of detecting and then helping you mitigate such attacks become extremely valuable in your environment, right? And the identification, again, yeah, it requires a lot of complex analytics to analyze billions of DNS queries, because keep in mind, no matter what we talk about, at the end of the day, we are referring to DNS database, DNS traffic, right? Any organization, let's say, an average organization, an average enterprise, which has about 10,000 users, can have almost up to 75 gigabits of just DNS traffic in a day, right? Analyzing that is a monumental task. No matter, how many people you have, how many resources you have deployed, you need a very elaborate system in place to start looking at the context, overall, and understand what's happening, and then try to detect and mitigate such attacks, right? Let's take just a few examples of what's happened in the recent past, right? We're talking about just the last couple of years. We had something called Vextrio, right? This was a malware that's been operating since 2021. It was using a lot of DGA. That's your dictionary generated algorithm. That's a technique used to very quickly deploy, like basically register a lot of domains that have been generated. The names of these domains have been generated via an algorithm. So there are a lot of similar, lookalike domains to the legitimate one. And it's very, very difficult to, discern them, at least by a user, right? Even
Right.
tools have a hard time keeping up with them because there's just so many of them, right?
Yeah.
So that's just one attack. These were all ignored by most of the tools out there as just adware, or just nuisance. Hey, someone's just standing up a lot of domains. If you remember, Shaumek, this was maybe about 5 to 7 years ago. After a wave of breaches at many enterprises, all of the enterprises started registering a lot of domains very similar to their ones, right? Basically, that was
Correct.
what we were calling a legitimate lookalike domain attack, because we were
Correct.
doing it ourselves to prevent cyber squatters out there on the internet, right? So, essentially, because of that, a lot of these domains registered and generated via DGA were just dismissed as, just nuisance, adware. Hey, it's not something we should be worried about. And because of that, again, that led a lot of attacks since 2021. We have another example that we call OpenTangle, right? So again, this has been operating since 2021. If you see, all of these find their roots into the whole work from anywhere that stemmed from, the COVID pandemic that kind of happened all over the globe, right? Then we have
Right.
decoy. In fact, Infoblox was the first company to detect decoy dog out there. And then about 5 to 6 months later, all of the other organizations started pulling up, decoy dog as a very serious, DNS attack vector, which was exploiting the DNS layer and exfiltrating data from the organization, right? The mechanism, the basic mechanism is the same as a remote access Trojan, but detection was challenging, and Infoblox was one of the companies, very few companies, in fact, we were the first ones to detect and then, disseminate this information across our cybersecurity fraternity, right? So this, I wanted to
Right.
paint a picture of what the threat landscape is, where the industry is going, and, how what is it that we should be worried about out there, right? So, what are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, I mean, it's still, something about DNS attacks. I mean, it's almost reptilian. They've been around for so long, but then they're just as dangerous as they were, when they started, and they are continually evolving. And the last horror show that we can remember, when it comes to cybersecurity, is of course WannaCry, which is again rooted back to DNS. And like you pointed out, uh, you know not just attacking a system, or not just a targeted cyber attack, but then this also contributes to the large amount of threat alerts that CISOs have to deal with. I mean, it's that massive volume that they're anyway troubled with, and this just contributes to it.
Oh no, that's absolutely right. That actually reminds me of an analogy, right? So, one of my friend who was constructing a house, we were just
Mhm.
walking through and it just hits me. So, my friend, yeah, they have the main door, right? They're putting the grill and the all the security doors, the ring to see who's out there and everything. And right next to the door, there's a big life-size window with absolutely no grill, nothing on it, which is openable, right? So this is exactly like
Right.
that. Deploy so many layers of security on what we think is the main door, while right next to it, you've got the highway of DNS just wide open for anyone to come in, just get in there, right? So it's just funny, but
True.
I
True.
have to put it out there so everyone can relate to it, right? So
Correct.
that's really, kind of where we are. And one of the biggest issues that makes the problem worse is the pace at which we're growing, right? We have
Mhm.
scaled from, hey, you need approval to work from home to, you know what, about 93% of the organizations now have normalized a hybrid workplace, right? We're
Right.
moving apps from private on-premise cloud rapidly to public clouds. We're, enabling API endpoints over the internet. We are ensuring everybody is on SSO and all the applications are available over the internet without a VPN. And, we're just the pace at which we're evolving is what is also causing the issue, because the security standards, the security policies that we have in place, the security framework that we have for detection is not evolving at the same level, right? So
True.
that is the problem. That's the cause that is making this problem worse, right? And on top of it, we have all of the IoT deployments as well, right? A lot of organizations are going to bring your own device because we're
Exactly.
doing everything over the
Mhm.
internet. Why should we tie an employee down to a company asset? Use a MacBook, use a Surface Pro, do it on your phone, right? Just bring your own device, just get the work done. If we are approaching that mentality, if we're going towards an Internet of Things place, and according to research that shows we're going to double whatever IoT framework we have today, the infrastructure evolves, the pace at which we are evolving, we also have to bring up, our security framework, right? And
Mhm.
that's exactly kind of where we're heading. So at this point, let's do a quick poll, with our audience to kind of understand what are, where are they in terms of their security framework. If they see a lot of alerts, what are some of their challenges that they're facing, right?
Sounds good. I think we can do a quick dip check. I see that some of the questions are already beginning to come through. I request the backend team to just pop up the first poll for us, please. Yeah, so seeing a bit of questions, I mean, quite a few questions coming in, and I would request you guys to, submit all your questions in the Q&A box. Uh, Pratik loves taking those Q&As, and we'd love to have a discussion with you, and you know, that's the best way we can hope for a webinar to go. So give us a couple of give us a couple of seconds. We are just waiting for the first poll to pop up. But these are really interesting numbers, Pratik. And this $4.4 million, we are seeing this grow up. I mean, going up every year. Uh, and DNS is again, one of the things that is contributing to it.
No, that's absolutely true. And one of the reasons why this also happens is And we talk about this a lot, but it's, it kind of goes, well, we don't pay enough attention to it, right? It's the visibility
Mhm.
at the end of the day, right? The
Correct,
faster
correct.
you can figure out where the source of the problem is, you can have all of the state-of-the-art tools, right? But when there is an incident, and there are two aspects to it. Number one, when there is an incident, are you able to quickly identify what the cause of the problem is and where is the source of this incident? And number two, and this is more important, are you able to get ahead of this with predictive, detections? That is really
Right.
what we have to be focusing, and the gap that we have in these areas is what is contributing to these numbers.
So, what's been your experience, Pratik? When you've been interacting with the security leaders, is this one of the challenges that you see? Okay, our poll results are already up. And the first one, do critical security alerts often go unnoticed? 55% of them say yes. Well, that's quite alarming. And the second one, does your organization employees get persistent security alerts? Again, a major portion of them again replying in the affirmative. So is that something that's in line with what you've observed or in your conversations with security leaders, Pratik?
It really is. It really is. And one of the contributing factors to that again is we've got so many different tools, right? Every tool is putting up some or the other form of alert, which is all coming into your SIEM solution, right? So now, if you have 10 tools and each tool is contributing 100 alerts, which is a very, very, very minuscule number, right? I've just taken that up as an example. We're talking about 1,000 alerts per second for our SecOps team to do, right? And then there is
Hmm.
the Herculean task of correlating all of this and figuring out where the problem is.
Right,
That again
exactly.
is where you're losing visibility. That is where you're losing control. What's going to happen at the end of the day when you're receiving so many alerts per second? You're going to select everything and then say answered, or not an alert, or it's a false positive, or you just resolve it, right? That's the problem. It's because of the noise that we're getting where even a significant issue can go unnoticed. And that is where, you
Exactly.
better context around what's happening. You're getting about 100 different alerts. But if you can narrow it down to a source every time and see, okay, where are we getting these alerts from? And then correlate that to
Hmm.
what's happening on the source, right? That's where the DNS layer starts helping you narrow certain aspects down. Is the source really talking to the internet? Is it making a lot of DNS queries, right? If there is no such
Right.
activity happening, if it's that context that helps you sort out what's really noise and what you need to be paying attention to. So yes, I mean these numbers don't surprise me. With all of my conversations with the leaders out there, one of the biggest challenges they have is, and they fear this the most, right? Whenever a new security product comes in, the biggest fear that they have is, oh God, now we have to deal with another bunch of alerts coming in from yet another product, right? That's what we need to control. As a cybersecurity fraternity,
Right.
we should really be going towards something that integrates across the board, right? And that's where, the key integration use cases that I was referring to before comes into place. We need tools that integrate with each other in order to build the context and thereby reduce the noise, right? Paint a better picture of what's happening in your environment. So that's really what we should be after.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And see that plays really well into again what I just spoke about, right? It is the integration. Whereas, what we have up here is the interoperability, right? Because a lot of times you would have noticed
Right.
this is a question I get from all the leaders out there. For example, let me take a specific use case of Infoblox, right? Now, Infoblox, our
Mhm.
security product, has an agent installation option available as deployment, right? This is for all the roaming users out there. Whenever, for example, you're working from home, you're connected to your home internet, right?
Hmm.
So you would still want your laptop, your device, your endpoint device to be protected because it is a company asset. You have information on there which could
Right.
be for a potential breach, right? So for this
Hmm.
use, we have an agent installation. The moment we say agent installation, all the leaders put their hands up in the air. They're like, oh my God, yet another agent, right? Because number one,
Right.
everybody installs an agent. It takes away resources from your computer. You put your hands up in
Exactly.
every agent you install on your machine, it reduces the performance of your machine, right? Now, on top
True.
of whenever you install a new agent, there's the biggest nightmare. Will this agent play well along with all of the other security agents we have out there, right? So that
Right.
interoperability that we have between different products is what is yet another challenge that we have, right? We've got endpoint protection, network detection, firewalls, your traditional XDR, all of these are component tools in their own specific domains, right? But unfortunately, they're all still very siloed. EDR is doing its own
Right.
job, but not really sharing information with, the antivirus that's going on out there. Or it's not sharing information with, let's say, like a tool like Varonis that is checking all of the
Hmm.
files and integrity and what's accessing it, right? That's really the siloed approach that we have today, that still exists today, is a huge challenge that all the leaders are still trying to tackle out there. And building those integrations, if all of these products can kind of talk to each other, that's really where the value is, right? Sharing of the data, right? Preventing this interoperability issues. So that's kind of where
Correct.
uh, this is going towards, right? I see you smiling out there, when I talk about multiple agents, right? And have you had any issues with that?
Well, the thing is, when I have these conversations with CIOs, I remember, back in the day when I started my career, there was still this debate on best in class versus, the all-in-one suite. But then
Right.
I've kind of, seen that, conversation kind of eliminated when it comes to cybersecurity, at least, because now, this entire concept of having different security products working in silos that don't talk to each other is just, it's unworkable with almost. So for better or worse, I think that this best in class kind of a thing is just out of the window right now. You need something where you have complete visibility, complete control, and yeah, things that talk to each other basically.
No, no, that's exactly right. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, right? That is exactly where the whole aspect of DNS detection and response comes into, the
Right.
right? Because we're talking about moving the security as close to the source as possible, right? Now,
Hmm.
it's kind of like a double-edged sword over here, right? Because we understand there are challenges with the way our cybersecurity framework has evolved. Yes, there are
Right.
very good tools available, but at the same time, yes, they are also siloed. So what can we do over
Hmm.
here? So that's kind of where this whole concept of defense in depth, where you have multiple different layers. Like I said, my friend with the door and multiple layers of, ring and the grills and everything comes into place. But at the same time, you also start looking at moving security as close to the source as possible, right? Identify all the ins and outs, identify exactly what enables you to establish that connect with the internet. And when you look at this, it starts boiling down to DNS, right? No
Right.
one is doing, hey, oh, I remember www.google.com is, 216.46.5.21. No one remembers that, right? I could have just as easily said that's the IP address of Google, and there's no way you would have immediately counted me on that because you don't remember the IP address. I don't. That's where DNS,
True.
right? We're all so dependent on DNS. So when we start looking at what is the foundational protocol that enables you to connect to the internet, when you realize it's DNS, when you realize it's DHCP, when you start offering IP addresses in order to get devices onto the internet, right? protecting that detection and response on the DNS layer becomes extremely crucial, right? And that is exactly where the concept of protective DNS comes in, because you're offering the,
Hmm.
as you know, you're offering the DNS service, you're also building DNS security protocols into it so that you protect and you detect very early on in your entire cybersecurity kill chain as to what is happening, right? Because you're
Right.
moving source as you're moving the security as close to the source as possible, right? Which means
Right.
now, instead of being reactive, you're actually going into a proactive mode, right? Even before my firewall kind of gets the information, the alert, before my firewall sees a connection request between a source and a destination over a protocol where the policy is built, it has already received possibly information from a tool that is saying, hey, you know what, next gen firewall, there is this particular IP address out there, there's this particular source. It is trying to reach out to attackerdomain.com. I have received that DNS
Hmm.
request. Here's the IP address, the MAC address, the username. Please block that, right? So now you're proactively, even
Right.
before the firewall has received a connection request, you've proactively put a policy in place against it, right? That's kind of like, all of this, that's the context of what's happening within your environment. And that's where these integrations with different cybersecurity tools out there, the integration with your entire ecosystem becomes
Hmm.
extremely important, right? It's the different aspects of it. You protect your DNS layer, you detect any anomalies out there, you identify the overall context, you identify the source of the problem, and then you start responding, right? And you do all of this in a cyclical manner, and you do all of this proactively. You don't wait for something to happen. You're constantly looking at the context. You are mapping out the user behavior. The endpoint has only been talking to Google and Yahoo for the last 24 hours, but in the last 2 hours,
Right.
sudden it's speaking to some domain registered, out of some blacklisted country, right? So those are like, your tools have to start asking questions rather than your SecOps individuals, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of where the DNS detection and response starts coming in, where identifying your DNS traffic helps you understand what's happening in your environment. It helps you understand exactly what is talking to who in the grand scheme of things. So you can better
Right.
protect yourself, right? So
Right. I think it's the context that that's most important here, and that's one major fill in the blank that I see accomplished out here.
no, no, absolutely, absolutely. And
Hmm.
if you look at it from an incident response and troubleshooting perspective as well, think of this. Anytime there is an alert and the SOC is after it in order to figure out where it's coming from, the first thing that they ask is, hey, what's the IP address? What's the user?
Hmm.
What's the MAC address? Where are you getting these alerts from, right? So having a DNS context around it, which also provides you this source information, so your mean time to remediation starts going down, right? Because you are able to isolate the problem faster. You're able to isolate the source fast, right? So you're absolutely right. Having that context around what's happening
Hmm.
is invaluable to the organization, right?
Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
So just moving forward along the same lines, what's really the value of DNS in security? Because so far, again, we've been talking a lot about how DNS layer is left wide open, how nothing really monitors DNS layer, how you're able to easily exfiltrate data through the life-sized window right next to the main door that you have protected. We've
Hmm.
talked a lot about this, right? But why are we talking so much about it? Yeah, let's take a step back now so that we're all on the same page. Why are we talking so much about using or protecting the DNS layer? Because very simply put, DNS spans the entire organization. No, nothing
Right.
works in an organization without DNS. Every device, every endpoint, every application relies on DNS, domain name system, to work, right? So when
Hmm.
that's the case, if we are not protecting and securing this layer, then we're not doing our jobs as cybersecurity professionals, right? That is something that everybody has to pay attention to. It is a foundational protocol, and therefore it is a foundational piece of your entire cybersecurity framework, right? It's not something, it's not a must, it's not a nice to have, but it becomes a must have, right? So you have to,
Absolutely.
right? Because DNS, it's the first hop. A DNS server is the first hop in your organization. Every device talks to a DNS server. So the kind of visibility that you get is just amazing, right? You can also start using this level of visibility as an asset management database, right? In order to map out your attack surface management, to understand exactly how far and wide your network is laid out, right? You know all the
Right.
different all the different ins and outs. So that's really where DNS, the value of DNS and security comes in. DNS is a universal layer, right? Everything needs DNS to connect, and therefore securing it is just of the utmost importance. And when you start looking at what is the kind of value that it really brings to your organization, right? So keep in mind, I made a very important point just now. DNS
Mhm.
is the first hop. DNS sees everything, right? Which means at any given point of time, you are always able to identify what the source is. You're able to move that security closer to source. And with DNS, you're able to detect any malicious DNS activities, right? In the last 5 years, according to
Right.
Gartner, 95% of attacks have leveraged DNS to be successful, right? Which means it is one of the
Mhm.
least secured protocol and one of the most exploited protocol to carry out successful attacks, right? So any of your command and control, it leverages DNS in order to establish those tunneling mechanisms. Any of your data exfiltration activity, for example, let's say personally identifiable information like credit cards, right? Credit card numbers that can be, put in a DNS packet and then exfiltrated out of your environment. Because a lot of the tools out there, they're just looking at, is this source allowed to go out to the internet for DNS activities? Is the application, is it DNS based application? Is it DNS traffic? Yes or no? But very rarely is something looking into exactly what is in a DNS query itself. Is it
Mhm.
credit card number dot attackerdomain.com, and is it going out to the internet, right? So that kind of data exfiltration protection, we talked about Vextrio, which leverage DGAs in order to be successful. So all
Mhm.
of the protection comes in the DNS layer because all of these are domain based, and you need a domain
Right.
protect tool in order to help you with this level of cybersecurity framework, right? So that's the value of DNS security. And on top of it, as we said, it's the visibility, because every single endpoint in your environment talks to the DNS layer, right? So, Shamik, at
Right.
this, I would also like to give a break to the audience, right? Because we've spoken a lot about, what the value of DNS security is, how it helps in your environment, what it does. So at this point, let's have another poll question to kind of understand, where the audience is with us, right? So we can talk specifically about some of the challenges that.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, I'm also seeing a lot of very interesting questions pop up in our Q&A box. We've got a couple of them. One is, yeah, we've got all of those products. This is Jacob Koitra, who's asking us, we have a lot of solutions which could do the same work, but then, what does what does Infoblox bring to the table? So what's the unique offering? We're going to table this for now, Jacob, because we've got a few more slides till we get to the end, and then at the end we are going to revisit the question if your answer has not been addressed by then already. So can we have the poll up for now? And guys, please do feel free with your questions. Pratik loves answering questions. Nitin as well out here. He's answering questions in the background, typing out the answers. But then there are certain questions we would want to take in the open forum as well. So feel free to share many questions as you want, please. All right, folks. The second poll, please. But I'm looking at the slide right now, and there's some pretty interesting stats they're going to revisit immediately after we see the results on this poll. All right, our second poll for now. In case of a security event, how fast are you able to identify and respond to the incident with accurate device, user info, and threat context?
This is a very good question, Shomik. The reason being, it actually
Mm-hmm.
ties into Jacob's question just now. We have
Right.
that are also able to do DNS security along with their specialized function, right? For example, a next-gen firewall. It is also able to do
Mm-hmm.
security along with its primary objective, which is perimeter security, right? So why Infoblox? That's a great question that we also get on a very regular basis from all of the leaders out there. And this question actually plays
Mm-hmm.
right. So, you're right. That's something that we should talk about. Let's table that. And I'm gonna play this poll question right to the answer to that one.
Well, I think Jacob kind of just volley or half volley out there, right into your preferred spot, and just right for the picking. All right, let's see the results on this one, and yeah, there's something I would want to know as well, on an industry average where we stand at, and yes, of course, what Infoblox brings to the table. All right, um, all right. Can I have our guy to actually close the poll and display the results for poll two? And then, do share what your expectations are from this poll. Prateek, is it in line with, what you've normally observed in the Indian context? And does it vary with, the global average as well? That's something I would want to know as well. Where do we stand in the global perspective? Because you look at SOC in addition to, Indian businesses.
Mhm.
Okay, so a few hours to a week. 58% of them say a few hours to a week. Um, More than 1 in 4 say immediately with pinpoint precision. That's impressive. But yeah, I mean, taking few hours to a week. Uh, how does that number look in today's context, Prateek?
So these numbers don't surprise me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I all the respect for the 27% that's actually said, they're able to pinpoint, the source of the incident with pinpoint precision, right? Immediately. Hats off to you guys. But the 58% that's actually said that it takes a few hours to, that is very in line with exactly what we're seeing out there in the industry, right? Because there's the problem is the source of the traffic is never really from one place, right? It might be
Right.
across multiple different, nodes. That is when the true source of the true origin starts getting obscure, right? That is exactly why it takes a few hours to weeks in order to
Mm-hmm.
where the problem actually, what is the genesis of the issue, right? So, the numbers don't surprise me. I actually expected about, 50 to 60% to say, yes, we have an issue with visibility. We have an
Right.
issue relating
With the
exactly
response time. Yeah.
this. So that's absolutely in line with that, right? Again, see, this is exactly where even with a tool like Infoblox, right, or any tool that is able to do DHCP fingerprinting, which is able to identify and classify different, endpoints and different devices in their environment, it really helps with the challenge that the 60% of the people are facing, right? With
Right.
identifying where the source of the issue truly lies, right? That is exactly where, if you have the kind of source information ahead of time, beforehand, at your fingertips, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't weeks to hours or, a few hours to a few weeks to identify where it is coming from. You have all the sources in your environment mapped out. You have all the DNS queries in your environment mapped out. you know exactly what is trying to call home to an attacker domain, right? So that is
Right.
exactly you're able to reduce your mean time to remediation, right? So those really are the benefits of having protective DNS in the first place, right? It's, you know, we have to simplify this because this is something that's also, you know, all of us security professionals are culpable. We bring out all of these new terms and we start throwing out all of jargons out there, right? There's just so many
Yeah.
to, we have to start simplifying and start calling it as it really is. What is protective DNS at the end of the day, right? Very simply, protect your DNS layer, right? You already have DNS layer in your environment. We are not talking about, hey, you have to overhaul your entire infrastructure in order to bring something new. We're not talking about that. You're already running DNS
Hmm.
private and recursive in your environment, right? All we're talking about is
Right.
like that, right? Whenever you have recursive queries going out to the internet, whenever you have any sort of queries, you know, forwarding, your overall DNS layer, establish a security protocol around it so you know what device is making what kind of DNS queries and you have a response against that, right? If it is an anomaly, if they are malicious in nature, you have a protection protocol in place to help you identify, detect, and mitigate. It is as
Right.
simple, right? We don't need any more acronyms out there, man. I have a tough time keeping up with all of these acronyms that we start coming out with, right? It's very simply just protect what you have. If you don't have
Mhm.
the, please come talk to me. Right? That's exactly what it is, right? So that's,
Right. And cybersecurity, of course, it's got a whole host of acronyms. We're guilty of that.
oh, I swear. I mean, you know, we're talking
Mhm.
about that landscape and how the pace of development is outpacing the evolution of what we rarely talk about is how far ahead the acronyms are, right? If one is on level one and level two, the acronyms are on the 10th floor already. I mean, they have surpassed everything in the market, right? So that's
Yeah.
a light note. So that's
I
really
love whoever came up with the acronym for Yara in Yara rules. That makes perfect sense.
absolutely right.
Right. Going ahead with the evolving threat that we were talking about at the beginning.
Lookalike domains, right? This is one
Hmm.
of the forms, and this is something we very lightly touched upon at the beginning of our discussion. But off late, right, 81% of the organizations in the last 12 months have experienced one or the other form of phishing and smishing attacks, right? And especially so all of these email, you know, phishing attacks that we get out there, because these lookalike domains are also evolving at a great level, right? It is no longer so it's a thing of the past where, for example, let's say you have infoblogs.com and there is a
Hmm.
typographic error in the name itself. That is a very, very, you know, old age form of phishing attack. Nowadays, what we're
Right.
looking is, let's say, like an internationalized, you know, domain name out there, which have different scripts. Like you have a very small a, right, which has a different italics or something to it. So you cannot even figure out that there is something wrong with this domain name, right? The spelling looks exactly the same. So these are the different kind of lookalike domains that are out there, which require sophisticated tools in order to identify them, right? All of these phishing attacks, anything that is using all the type of squatting names out there, anything for spear phishing that, you know, enables brand compromise. Brand compromise at the end of the
Hmm.
day, right? Because everyone is trying to, you know, protect your brand reputation. Tomorrow, if let's say, you know, you've constantly been going on to any of these commerce site and you've been buying a lot of products, right? All of a sudden, if there is any sort of, you know, man in the middle attack, or if there is any sort of lookalike domain that's, you know, inserted somewhere along the process, and instead of the legitimate e-commerce site, you end up going to a spoof site and you start losing a lot of money. that's a direct hit on the legitimate brand's reputation, right? We no longer trust it. Every time we want to go and buy something, we're like, oh my God, are we going to the proper site, or, are we going to a spoof site, right? And we
Right.
slowly looking away from it, right? So that brand reputation is of immense value. That protection around your brand and the prevention of your brand compromise, that's exactly where detecting and protecting your lookalike domains, protecting yourself from lookalike domain attacks is extremely important, right? And along the same lines, again, I think now we're just going to start switching gears a little bit, and this is what the audience is
Mhm.
really. It's the ecosystem, the integration. So I've spoken a lot about lookalike domains, data exfiltration, command, all of these different protocols that are leveraging DNS and tunneling information out to the attackers, right? They are enabling a breach in your environment. How do
Mhm.
they do it with your ecosystem, right? It's cybersecurity tools should not be just another tool that comes into your environment. It should also be something that enriches your existing cybersecurity environment, right? And that's kind of really where we should be heading towards. Everything should be a cybersecurity framework. Everything has to talk to each other. We should not be looking at siloed, environments out there. Everything has to be interoperable, and information and context has to be shared amongst each other. And rightly so, Infoblogs has a lot of alliance partners out there, right? And as
Mhm.
you up on the slide, all of the industry leaders in different verticals of security and networking were partnered up with everybody, right? What this means to a consumer, to our customers, is that any information that you have with Infoblogs can be exchanged into your existing cybersecurity framework. It can be used to trigger certain processes, or it can be used to trigger certain, information mechanisms in your existing environment, right? Be it a vulnerability management tool, be it a next-gen firewall, an endpoint detection, what have you, right? Infoblogs is also, we're helping move information and enrich your existing information out there, right? So this is kind of what a true cybersecurity product should be all about: enriching your existing ecosystem. Um, how do you feel about all of this? Like, you see a lot of partners out here, a lot of different.
I mean, it looks nice in a box, Pratik. But then I think to condense it, it's more like Infoblox is that one kid in school who knows all the popular kids and is friends with everyone. So you're talking to everyone, so you know a little bit about everyone, and then uh, you know somebody who's friends with you also gets to know about this extensive threat intel, and that's pretty interesting. But something that I was really keen on is something that a lot of CISOs have also been talking about, and that is reducing the mean time to detect and respond to threats, because now we've got a CERT directive also mandating a 6-hour breach reporting guideline, and of course we've got stricter data protection norms at this point in time as well.
No, that's and I love the analogy that you put out there, where it's that one popular kid who's got all of this information and everybody is talking to the kid, right?
Mm.
That's actually excellent, because we're going to go through some of the integration use cases as well, and you will see that that's exactly what Infoblogs is helping you, right? We're consolidating the information, we're consolidating the context, and we're trying to, bring all of the other, kids into the environment, right? That's the whole point. Before we jump into the use cases, let's take a look at a quick case study, right?
Okay,
This
sure.
are customers, who was using Microsoft DNS, Microsoft Active Directory integrated DNS, and they were facing a few challenges. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of our audience out there which is also possibly using Microsoft Active Directory integrated DNS in their environment, right? So let's talk about it from a security standpoint. And again, Jacob, this kind of plays into, hey, we already have DNS security tools out there, so why Infoblox DNS security? Right? Quickly, demystify what's happened at this organization. So they have Active Directory integrated
Mhm.
DNS. Means they already have DNS established in their environment. All of the endpoints are talking to the first hop, which is the Microsoft DNS server, right? And the Microsoft DNS server is then doing all of the recursive queries out there, right? So now what happens is this biggest challenge where all of this DNS traffic is going through all the different layers of security that you have out there, correct? So let's take one of this, for example, a next-gen firewall, which also has DNS security as an add-on capability. Right? If there is a malicious DNS request, who do you think the next-gen firewall is going to point to as a culprit? The Microsoft DNS server, right? Because it is seeing all of the DNS
Mhm.
queries from the Microsoft domain controller. So now, when you want to troubleshoot, what are you going to do? You're going to look at your SIEM environment. You're going to see that, okay, all of these DNS alerts have been generated by your next-gen firewall and the DNS security module running out there. You're going to see that the source IP address is that of a Microsoft DNS domain controller. Now you're going to start looking at all of the domain controller logs to figure out what the true source of the query is. But there is one big challenge over here because Microsoft DNS, you have to go into the event viewer, you have to start enabling DNS debugging logs in order to figure out where all of the DNS traffic is coming from, right? So
Right.
challenge with visibility, this challenge with identifying exactly where the source is, was rendering their stock inefficient and ineffective in identifying exactly what the true source of any bad data is. And this is exactly where
Mhm.
a customer of ours reached out to us for DNS detection and response, right? So what Infoblox was able to do was we were able to provide DNS security into their environment where all of the endpoints were talking to Infoblox for all of their DNS protocol requirements, right? Any DNS query, whether it is private or recursive, was coming to Infoblox, and Infoblox was completely able to secure that DNS layer itself, right? We were able to administer any and all security policies put out there by the corporate, and we were able to ensure there is no data exfiltration, there is no command and control, provide them complete context as to which source is making what DNS query, right? This achieved two things. Number
Right.
one, gives you incredible visibility into every single endpoint out there that you have in your environment. And number two, it was able to take away the DNS load from all of your other tools, right? Keep in mind, DNS generates a lot of chatter and a lot of traffic. If your next-gen firewalls, if your endpoint detection with DNS security, if all of these tools are analyzing and sifting through all of this DNS database, that is taking resources away from their primary objective, which is security policy administration, right? So that is going to start rendering your next-gen firewalls. It's going to start affecting their performance, and it's going to increase your cost of ownership across the board, right? So that is exactly where having a DNS detection and response, a specialized tool, helps. And that's kind of like one of the case studies that we had out there. Do you have any questions on this one, Shamik? Uh, I'm
Specific
sorry.
use cases, because that is something that Jacob questions on this one at this point.
Great. So understood. Let's move on to some of the integration use cases as well, right? So
No, Pratik, Nitin this side. Before moving towards that, we actually need to understand one more aspect of this. Whenever
okay.
we talk about security, it, how better the
Mhm.
tool is does not matter. How good it is being implemented does matter, right? And when we talk about any organization across the globe, you'll find one thing which is common, you will find it as DNS port 53 is allowed for communication,
That's
right? And you can't block that port because that's the dependency of the organization. If you want to work, you want to collaborate with the world, you have to have that particular policy in place, right? On top of it, when we talk about putting DNS on your AD server, brings up a whole Pandora box of the threats. Like if a attacker got access of your DNS, by default he gets the access of your Active Directory, right? Now,
Mhm.
suppose I'm a user in an organization. I raise a request on a CNC server over DNS, right? I tried to resolve that domain, got the response as an X domain for sake, right? Means it clearly says domain does not exist, but the communication chain is completed. I've requested, I've got the response, and that response can have anything. Now, the security tool which you have deployed, like your firewalls, XDRs, IPSs, everything which will come into the picture when the traffic gets converted in 90% cases from DNS to maybe HTTP, HTTPS, or any other protocol, because these tools are designed to serve those protocols, not DNS.
that's exactly true.
Correct?
Absolutely.
And
And
and if you are behind that particular protocol, you are not touching any of that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You are, and that's where when we talk about any advanced threat, it stays in the organizations. The average mean time says 270 days. How it has started from 220 days when I was we were talking about 2015 16, right? And it reaches to 270, means they have a gate from where they comes in, they goes out, and they stays undetected for very longer period in the environment, right? And that's where the importance comes to the picture, that if we have a back door at our house, that should be more protected than the front gate, because we know anyone can come in from the front gate, and that's open for the people to come in, right? But there's a back gate, and we don't know who is coming from there and who is going out if it is not protected.
no, no, I completely agree with that, right? And that's again, it plays right into the mean time to remediation, right? But at the end of the day, if you're able to identify who's coming in through the back gate quickly, and even before that, if you can identify if somebody is coming through that, then you can protect yourself better, right? So I completely agree with your point on that. And just merging that conversation into our integration as well, like you said, it's how good you have implemented a tool, but at the same time, it's also what quality of information is being received at all of these tools, or what quality of information is being provided by all of these tools, right? So I'm kind of running through different kinds of integrations over here, where Infoblogs especially is able to talk to your CM environment, your security orchestration environment, and provide very valuable information such as IP addresses, MAC addresses, the username. These are all the contextual data. These are all endpoint identification data that helps you better sort out the quality of the alerts that you're getting in, right? It helps you
Mhm.
distinguish what is noise, and it helps you identify the real attacks, the real threats, and then quickly, you know, isolate what's happening. But the larger question is, again, how does this at a 30,000-foot level, at a very high level, look like, right? So let me just, while I'm running through different slides, we're touching on different products. Let me just paint a very simple high level use case, right? So you have a compromised endpoint, which is making malicious DNS requests. Because you have DNS security, the DNS security tool being the first hop, was able to identify that this endpoint is making malicious DNS requests. This DNS security tool has information to IP address and MAC address, right? Let's just say take 2 points, IP address and MAC, more than enough. Now, with these 2 points, the DNS security tool can build that into an indicator of compromise and then push that into your cybersecurity ecosystem. What does that mean? That means your SIEM tool now knows that, okay, there is something, malicious happening at this indicator of compromise, an IP address and a MAC address. Your vulnerability management tools can be triggered to perform vulnerability scans at the IP address that the DNS security tool just provided. Your next-gen firewalls can put proactive security quarantine policies in place, preventing the source IP that was provided by DNS security tool or Infoblox in order to ensure no traffic goes east, west, or north, south, right? And then start triggering other mechanisms within your SOAR environment, right? So these are the different ways that a DNS security tool adds value in your organization, where it is not only able to provide the source information, but it will also help you kickstart certain responses from all of other cybersecurity ecosystems in place, right? So it helps you with that kind of visibility. It helps you with your entire chain proactive in nature, right? So that's really all the different, integrations with our cyber security systems out there. Now, ITSM, this is something that I'm sure a lot will be interested in with
Mhm.
service, right? Anytime, like Nitin said, DNS is the master key to your environment, right? If you get hold of DNS, you get hold of everything. So if there are any changes made to the DNS database, that should also be audited and tracked. And that's where Infoblox's integration with ServiceNow comes in very handy, where any changes to IP addresses or DNS records can then be pushed as an API call to ServiceNow and created a ticket or an incident ticket, a service request, a change ticket, whatever on ServiceNow, right? So that way you get an end-to-end process built in place, right? So these are basically, all the different integrations that Infoblox has, with multiple different security vendors out there. We're also 5 minutes over our slotted time. So, Shamik, at this point, if we want to take in maybe a couple of questions, and then we can,
Sure. I think you've answered the point on use cases. So I think that answered a couple of questions right there. We've got a couple of more questions, but and I would want to invite Nitin as well to join us now. Nitin, if you could join us for the last few minutes, we'd like to take a few questions here. All right, we have Jacob
Yeah,
again
for
who's
sure.
asking us. Hi, Nitin. We have Jacob again who's asking us with the EDR integrating with SIM and SOAR tools. SIM and SOAR could also capture or alert or correlate IP and MAC and malicious activities and behavior. So, what is the same value provided by DNS Infoblocks?
you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll take it up. So when we talk about a EDR tool, first we need to understand how this tool works. If you want that EDR to trigger, you need to have some file for detection per se, right? But when we talk about a DNS request, yes, you will be able to capture the IP for sure, because if I'm detecting something, I can provide the details, right? But if the tool itself is not capable to detect that malicious communication or unknown, uncategorized communication, how will I get that information and where I'll get that information from? And that's where, when we talk about putting EDR is a good option, I'm not denying that at all. EDR is a good option, but once you deploy a security on DNS, you get 47% reduction in the downtime of endpoints when it comes to the security incidents. So these are the average out numbers. Means obviously EDR will give you the value, but what about the things which has not been triggered by EDR, right? because this tool will only trigger when the attack or threat is in your organization.
Right.
DNS will trigger when it is in the pre-attack phase itself, when they're trying to do a recon for your organization, when they are trying to initiate the first connection towards CNC server. DNS will trigger.
Right. We have another question by Himanshu, if either of you want to take it. So, if Active Directory is integrated with Next Gen Firewall, what makes you single sign on to log in from computer and access the internet? Is that a correct approach? What's your take on that? Would you want to take that, Nitin?
So, whenever we talk about communicating to internet, right, DNS is as important as your internet connectivity. If anything goes down, you'll not be able to browse for sure,
Right.
because
Right.
DNS is the directory. Means if you want a phone number with the name, you need to have that directory in place, right? If you do not have that directory, you'll not be able to communicate. And that's where, whenever you get authenticated with Active Directory, obviously you use firewall, but in between that, you use DNS for communication, right? Why we do not monitor that particular stuff? Because we are using that technology from last 40 years, and it is there, not creating any problem in terms of communication, means it is working perfectly fine. We can ignore it, but that's not the actual case, right? Attackers are actually taking the middle path of it. And that's
Right.
where they are compromising your Active Directory, because your DNS is on Active Directory itself, right?
Hmm.
Now, if I've got the access of your DNS, I'll create a username in your Active Directory. I'll become an administrator for you. Now, if I am
Right.
administrator, and in any country, whether we talk about India or anywhere else, the names are pretty common, right? Organization with 5,000 is in strength, no one can identify who this user is by just seeing the name.
Well, I think that addressed, most of the questions here. We took as many questions as we could, but we've already overshot by 10 minutes. But I thank you so much, audience, for sharing your questions. You've been very participative, very enthusiastic. And I'd love to thank Prateek Prasad from Infoblogs, as well as Nitin Dubey. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, sharing best practices, and of course, most importantly, how do you put DNS to actually counteract? How do you make DNS to actually serve your needs? So yeah, got to learn a lot, and I hope you guys did too. Thank you, dear audience, for joining us today. Uh, this is Shomik Ghosh signing off from EPCSO. Have a great evening, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.